Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy History Channel. Tonight, we're setting out across open water into one of the most haunting corners of maritime history, the world of ghost ships, vessels found drifting with no crew, journeys that began with purpose, yet ended in silence, stories that begin with real events, then slowly blur into legend. For centuries, sailors have reported ships that should not be there. Ships that appear out of fog or arrive without a single soul aboard. Some were discovered with meals untouched. Others carried clues that raised more questions than answers. And a few seemed to vanish from history, only to return years later, still wandering. These are not just tales of the supernatural. They are stories shaped by storms, fear, isolation, and the vast uncertainty of the sea itself. Places where small decisions could echo across entire lifetimes, and where the truth could slip away as easily as a ship over the horizon. If you enjoy these gentle journeys, I invite you to like, subscribe, or share a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, all you need to do is relax. Let your body soften. Let your eyes grow heavy. And let your mind drift as we move out into the open sea. Let's begin. The Mary Celeste was found drifting with no one aboard. In December of 1872, a British brigantine called the Dei Gratia spotted a ship moving strangely in the Atlantic. That vessel was the Mary Celeste. She was under sail and still seaworthy, yet when a boarding party climbed aboard, they found no captain, no crew, and no passengers. The cargo of industrial alcohol remained in the hold. Valuable belongings were still there. Food and water were still aboard. The ship's papers were largely intact, but the lifeboat was gone. It was the kind of discovery that seems impossible at first glance, because a ship is a floating world, and worlds do not simply empty themselves. The captain, Benjamin Briggs, had sailed with his wife and young daughter. Then all of them vanished into open water without leaving a clear answer behind. That single scene, an intact ship without its people, helped define the modern idea of a ghost ship. Some ghost ships sailed on for years after their crews vanished. What makes certain abandoned vessels so mesmerizing is not only that they were deserted, but that they kept going. Once a ship is left to wind, current, and weather, it does not always sink quickly. Sometimes it becomes a wandering machine, still moving long after human control has vanished. The best-known examples were found hundreds or even thousands of miles from the place where their stories broke apart. That means an empty ship could cross busy sea lanes, reappear near coasts, or seem to return from nowhere months later. Sailors knew this, which is why a strange silhouette on the horizon could be deeply unsettling. It might be a vessel from another season, another ocean, another disaster. In some cases, these drifters lasted so long that multiple generations reported seeing them. An abandoned ship could outlive the memory of its crew, and that is part of what makes the idea so haunting. The voyage continued, but the people did not. Ice, war, plague, and mutiny all helped create ghost ships. A ghost ship did not need anything supernatural to begin. History produced them again and again through very real human crises. In polar waters, vessels were trapped so completely by sea ice that crews had no choice but to leave them behind. In wartime, torpedo damage, fire, or panic could send sailors into lifeboats while the ship itself remained afloat. Disease brought its own terror. During outbreaks of plague or cholera, ports feared infected ships, and even rumors could turn a drifting vessel into an object of dread. Then there was mutiny, the oldest nightmare of command at sea. If authority collapsed far from land, a ship might continue on with no lawful order or with no one left at all. Each of these paths led to the same eerie image, an apparently intact vessel moving through open water after the human story inside it had broken apart. The sea did not care why the deck was empty. It simply kept carrying the ship onward. The Flying Dutchman became the most famous phantom ship on Earth. Long before cinema and modern horror, sailors already had a ship that seemed to belong to nightmare. The Flying Dutchman was said to appear in storms, glowing or unnatural, unable to make port and condemned to roam forever. Unlike the Mary Celeste, this was not a documented abandonment case. It was a legend, shaped over generations by fear, weather, and the enormous loneliness of ocean travel. That is exactly why it became so powerful. It turned the sea itself into a storyteller. A distant ship in bad light, a vessel half seen through spray, or a mirage near the horizon could suddenly feel like a warning sent from another world. The tale spread so widely that it moved from sailor talk into literature, painting, opera, and popular culture. It became more than a story about one ship. It became the symbol of every impossible sighting at sea and every fear that the horizon might deliver something real, but not entirely of this world. Real ghost ships were often found with meals still waiting. One of the details that groups people most is not cannon fire, storm damage, or shattered wood. It is ordinary life interrupted. Again and again, accounts of abandoned ships mention signs that something stopped suddenly. A meal partly prepared, a galley in use, personal belongings left where they should have been collected. These details matter because they make the mystery feel immediate. They suggest that whatever happened did not unfold over many calm hours. It arrived quickly enough to break the rhythm of daily life aboard ship. And life at sea depended on rhythm. Watches changed. Meals were timed. Duties repeated. To find those patterns broken in the middle makes the scene far more chilling than simple wreckage ever could. The empty deck says people are gone. The unfinished meal says they expect it to remain. That contrast is what lingers in the imagination. It turns a maritime incident into something deeply human, because the silence begins in the middle of an ordinary day. Some abandoned ships drifted farther than many captains ever sailed. A captain might spend years planning routes, studying winds, and calculating distance. Yet once a ship lost its people, nature could sometimes carry it across astonishing stretches of ocean. The currents of the North Atlantic and North Pacific are not random. They are great moving systems, powerful enough to transport wreckage, fishing gear, ice, and at times, entire vessels. That means an abandoned ship could begin one life under human intention and finish another under the mechanics of the planet itself. A vessel left in one region might later be seen near another coastline entirely, transformed from a practical object into a rumor with rigging. To the sailors who encountered such drifters, the scale of the journey must have been astonishing. Here was a ship that had crossed seas with no orders shouted and no hands on the wheel. It had become a passenger of wind and water alone. In a strange way, some ghost ships achieved a final voyage grander than the one they were built to make. Arctic ice preserved lost ships like messages from another century. In the far north, a ship could vanish without vanishing completely. The Arctic has a way of holding history in suspension. When vessels were trapped in pack ice, they were not always smashed at once. Some remained locked in place, preserved by cold, darkness, and the slow grip of frozen sea. That gave them a strange afterlife. They became less like wrecks and more like sealed rooms from another age. Clothing, tools, food tins, books, and pieces of daily routine could remain astonishingly intact. When later expeditions found traces of these ships, it was as if time itself had thinned. The preserved remains of polar exploration are powerful because they show ambition colliding with an environment that barely notices ambition at all. A lost ship in warm water quickly dissolves into the sea. In the Arctic, it may wait. It may hold its silence for generations. And when it is finally found, it can seem to speak in the voice of the century that sent it north. A single missing lifeboat could turn a vessel into legend. Sometimes the most important clue on a deserted ship was not what remained, but what did not. A missing lifeboat changed everything. It suggested that the crew had not simply been swept overboard or killed where they stood. They had made a decision. They had lowered a boat, or tried to, and left the relative shelter of the ship for open water. That one fact could transform the entire mystery. Suddenly, the abandoned vessel became the safer of two terrible choices. Why would people leave it? Fire, fear of explosion, false hope of land, rough weather, damaged equipment, or panic after a sudden shock could all play a part. Yet if the main ship stayed afloat after they departed, then the emptiness became even more tragic. Rescuers were left staring at a survival choice that may have doomed everyone. This is one reason ghost ship stories endure. They are not only puzzles. They are moments when human judgment met the sea under pressure, and the sea never explained the result. Newspapers once turned deserted ships into worldwide supernatural mysteries. In the age of sail and steam, an eerie maritime story could travel astonishingly fast once the press got hold of it. A deserted vessel was perfect newspaper material. It had danger, distance, missing people, and just enough evidence to invite invention. Reports moved through port cities, telegraph lines, illustrated weeklies, and later popular magazines. With each retelling, uncertainty became atmosphere. Ordinary details were sharpened into ominous clues. Missing paperwork became suspicious. A damaged hatch became sinister. And before long, a hard maritime question could begin to sound like proof of the supernatural. This mattered because many readers would never see the ocean, much less board a ship in mid-Atlantic or Arctic fog. The newspaper became the sea for them. It built the image in their minds. That is how some ghost ships grew larger than the events that created them. They were not only maritime mysteries. They were media phenomena, shaped by the age's hunger for sensation, wonder, and stories that refused to close neatly. Many ghost ships were real disasters, later wrapped in myth. That may be the most fascinating truth of all. Behind many famous ghost ship tales lies a real chain of events: harsh weather, navigational error, disease, mechanical trouble, bad decisions, or plain bad luck. Over time, however, the human mind smooths rough edges and fills empty spaces. A difficult case becomes a haunting one. Conflicting testimony becomes a curse. An abandoned vessel becomes a phantom. This process does not erase the truth. It layers something new over it. The result is a story with two lives. One belongs to history, built from logs, wreck reports, survivor accounts, and maritime lore. The other belongs to imagination, built from fear, repetition, and the irresistible pull of unanswered questions. Ghost ships live at the meeting point of those two worlds. They remind us that history is not only what happened, it is also what people believed, repeated, embroidered, and passed on. The sea supplied the mystery. Human beings made sure it would never be forgotten. The Mary Celeste's cargo was untouched when the ship was boarded. When boarding sailors searched the hold in December of 1872, they found more than 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol still in place. that mattered immediately. If pirates had taken the ship, the valuable cargo should have been missing. If robbery had driven the disaster, cabins and storage would likely have been stripped. Instead, the vessel carried the eerie impression of interrupted purpose. The wealth remained below deck, while the people who stood to profit from delivering it were gone. That one detail helped turn the case into a true mystery, instead of a simple crime story. Yet the cargo may also hold part of the answer. Industrial alcohol was volatile. Some barrels were later found empty or leaking, which raised the possibility of fumes building in the hold. An explosion, or even the fear of one, might have sent the captain into a terrible decision. The untouched cargo did not solve the puzzle. It deepened it. The day Gracia discovered the Mary Celeste, completely deserted at sea. The ship that found the mystery was not a rescue steamer or naval patrol. It was another merchant vessel, the Dei Gracia, commanded by Captain David Morehouse. In early December, while crossing the Atlantic, Morehouse noticed a brigantine ahead behaving oddly. She yawed uncertainly and failed to answer proper signals. That was the first warning that something was badly wrong. When a boarding party rowed across and climbed aboard, they entered one of the most famous scenes in maritime history. The sails were set badly. Water stood in the bilge, though not enough to sink her. Navigation equipment was missing. No one called out. No footsteps answered. The crew of the Dei Gracia then faced a strange practical problem. They had found a valuable vessel, but bringing her safely into port meant risking storm, legal dispute, and suspicion. They divided their own men and sailed both ships onward. The mystery began in loneliness, but it survived because witnesses reached her before the sea erased everything. Captain Briggs vanished with his family, and no trace was found. Benjamin Briggs was not an unknown drifter or reckless adventurer. He was a respected New England captain with a reputation for sobriety, religious seriousness, and caution at sea. That is one reason his disappearance has gripped people for so long. He had chosen to take his wife Sarah and their young daughter Sophia aboard for the voyage, which suggests confidence in both the ship and the route. Their presence changes the emotional weight of the story. This was not only a maritime puzzle. It was a family that stepped into the Atlantic and never returned. Briggs had a son too, but the boy had been left ashore with relatives because he was ill. That surviving child gave the loss an even sharper edge. Somewhere between one ordinary day at sea and the next, an experienced captain, his household, and his crew vanished together. No confirmed body, no lifeboat landing, and no final message ever closed the gap they left behind. The logbook aboard Mary Celeste ended days before discovery. A captain's log is meant to push back against uncertainty. It marks position, weather, course, and the steady order of a voyage. On this ship, that thread of order suddenly frayed. The last entry was dated about 10 days before the vessel was boarded, placing her near the Azores, far short of where she was eventually found. That missing stretch of time is one of the most tantalizing voids in maritime history. The ship kept moving, yet the written record stopped. We know nothing directly from the captain's hand about what the crew saw, feared, or debated during those final days aboard. Was there worsening weather? Trouble with the pumps? Concern over fumes in the hold? An attempt to take soundings near land that went wrong? The silence of the logbook invites every theory because it ends before the story does. For historians, that is agony. For everyone else, it is the perfect opening through which mystery enters and refuses to leave. Alcohol fumes may have sparked panic aboard the Mary Celeste. One of the most persuasive theories does not require murder, sea monsters, or mutiny. It begins with chemistry. The vessel carried casks of industrial alcohol, and some were later found leaking. If fumes escaped into the hold, they could have created a terrifying situation for anyone aboard. Alcohol vapor is highly flammable. A flash fire or pressure burst can happen without leaving the sort of scorched destruction people expect from a full explosion. That matters because a sudden roar, heat, or violent blast of air might convince even an experienced captain that the ship was about to be destroyed. Imagine the choice in that moment. A wife and child are aboard. The crew sees danger below. The lifeboat is lowered as a temporary precaution, while the main ship is kept in sight by rope. Then, weather shifts, the line parts, and the larger vessel sails away empty. It is only a theory, but it has power because it turns mystery into one panicked minute. The ship, now called Mary Celeste, was first launched as Amazon. Before she became the world's most famous deserted vessel, she had another name and another life. She was launched in Nova Scotia in 1861 as the Amazon. Even that first chapter seemed touched by ill fortune. Her original captain died not long after her maiden voyage began. Later, she suffered collisions and damage, changed owners, and moved through a string of hard turns that invited people to whisper about bad luck. Eventually, she was rebuilt and renamed. That new identity, Mary Celeste, should have marked a fresh start, but instead, it carried the ship toward immortality of the strangest kind. The earlier name matters because it reminds us that ships had biographies, not just voyages. They aged or repaired, bought, sold, and repurposed. Long before abandonment made headlines, this vessel had already lived a restless maritime life. By the time she entered legend, she was not a blank slate. She was a working ship with scars, history, and a reputation ready to grow darker. The Carroll A. Deering stranded in plain sight off North Carolina. In January of 1921, a large 5-masted schooner ran hard aground on Diamond Shoals off Cape Hatteras, one of the most feared stretches of the American coast. There was nothing subtle about the sight. The ship stood visible in daylight, close enough to shore for watchers to study her through glasses. Yet even with the wreck plainly there, the people who should have been aboard were missing. That contrast made the case unforgettable. Many maritime disappearances unfold far from witnesses and leave almost nothing behind. This one arrived dramatically on a notorious graveyard coast and still refused to explain itself. Dangerous seas prevented an immediate boarding, so the schooner remained in view while rumor had time to breed. By the time rescuers finally reached her, the mystery had swollen. A huge vessel had not vanished into fog or storm. It had appeared almost theatrically at America's edge, empty where it should have been crowded with hands who knew those waters could kill. The Deering's galley looked active, but the crew had disappeared. When investigators boarded the grounded schooner, they found details that felt uncannily fresh. In the galley, food appeared to have been prepared or at least laid ready for use. It looked less like the aftermath of long abandonment and more like a working ship whose routine had been broken in mid-motion. That kind of evidence is powerful because it narrows the sense of time. Whatever happened may have unfolded quickly, perhaps between one ordinary task and the next. Yet the crew's personal gear and life-saving equipment told a different part of the story. Men had not merely vanished from the deck. They had gone, seemingly together, and in some organized way. The combination is what haunts. There are signs of work, signs of departure, and no clear bridge between them. Maritime history is filled with wrecks that explain themselves through violence. This one offered order without people and activity without conclusion, which is often far more unsettling than a shattered hull. Bottles, rumors, and radio chatter deepened the Deering mystery. The schooner's story grew because strange fragments kept attaching themselves to it. One was a message reportedly found in a bottle, claiming the crew had been seized by mutineers. Another was a pattern of rumors linking the case to radical politics, piracy, and criminal conspiracy in the tense years after the First World War. Then there were radio reports and half-trusted accounts from passing ships and coastal stations, enough to suggest movement around the vessel before she grounded, but never enough to settle what that movement meant. The age itself added fuel. Radio was still new enough to feel uncanny, and public trust in institutions was shaken by war, labor unrest, and espionage scares. So the mystery did not stay a maritime investigation for long. It became a mirror for the fears of its time. Every uncertain signal and every doubtful message made the schooner feel less like a stranded wreck and more like the center of a hidden drama no one could fully see. The Bechimo became an Arctic ghost ship that refused to sink. The Bechimo was built for trade in northern waters, and that mattered because ordinary ships were not made to endure the punishment she faced. In 1931, while carrying cargo near Alaska, she became trapped in pack ice late in the season. Her crew waited, hoping conditions would ease, but winter tightened its grip. At one point, the vessel seemed so doomed that much of the crew was evacuated by air, which already gives the story an almost cinematic quality. Then the ship broke free and drifted away. Searchers found her again, only for another blizzard to swallow her once more. After that, she entered legend. Decade after decade, people reported seeing her wandering the Arctic. She had become more than abandoned. She had become stubborn. In a region where the environment crushes wood, steel, and human plans alike, this vessel seemed to keep surviving. That is why her story feels so powerful. She was not simply lost. She kept coming back. The Bechimo was sighted again and again across many years. Most ghost ships burn brightly in the imagination for a short time, then disappear into rumor. This vessel was different because witnesses kept renewing the story. Traders, hunters, coast watchers, and local residents reported seeing her repeatedly after abandonment. One year she was found trapped in ice. Later she was seen drifting offshore. At other times she appeared near the Alaskan coast like a ship that had wandered out of an earlier decade and refused to accept it was over. These repeated sightings gave her a strange status in northern lore. She was not just a mystery from the past. She was a moving possibility in the present. Any horizon might produce her. That kind of recurrence changes the emotional shape of a ghost ship tale. Instead of one chilling discovery, there is a pattern, a rhythm of disappearances and returns. The ship becomes less like a corpse and more like a survivor, worn down by weather, but still somehow negotiating with ice, sea, and time on her own terms. Frozen seas trapped the Bechimo, but the ship kept escaping. Pack ice can behave like a prison made of moving walls. It grips a hull, squeezes timbers or steel, and can hold a ship so completely that the ocean beneath almost ceases to matter. That is what makes this case so compelling. Time after time, the vessel seemed captured by Arctic ice, and time after time, she reappeared free again. She was not fighting her way out under power. She was being released by the same immense natural forces that had seized her. Storms shifted pressure ridges. Leads opened in the ice. Winds and currents took hold. The result was a ship that seemed to vanish into white stillness and emerge elsewhere like something almost deliberate. For people living and working in the north, this was a dramatic reminder that the Arctic is never truly still. Even its silence moves. The vessel's repeated escapes made her feel uncanny, as though the region had adopted her, hidden her for a while, then set her loose whenever it pleased. Some Inuit reportedly boarded the Beichimo long after abandonment. One of the most extraordinary parts of the story is that the vessel was not always viewed from a distance. Accounts survive of Inuit travelers and hunters who reportedly came alongside and boarded her years after the original abandonment. That possibility changes everything. It turns the ship from a legend on the horizon into a physical place people could enter, touch, and search. Imagine stepping from sea ice or a small boat onto the deck of a vessel that no captain had commanded for years. Cabins still stood. Equipment remained. The ship carried the stale air of disuse and the cold patience of the Arctic. These reports also show how northern communities were not passive listeners to imported ghost stories. They were direct observers of events in waters outsiders often barely understood. Their sightings and encounters kept the vessel grounded in lived reality, even as southern audiences turned her into myth. The ship was eerie, yes, but it was also simply there, weathering slowly in a world that demanded practical courage. The Beichimo became a wandering legend of the Alaskan coast. Some ships leave behind wreckage. Others leave behind a route of sightings, campfire retellings, and local expectation. This vessel entered the folklore of the Alaskan and Western Arctic coast because she occupied that rare space between confirmed fact and almost unbelievable persistence. People knew she had existed, knew she had been abandoned, and knew others had seen her again. That certainty gave the legend unusual strength. It did not depend on a single dramatic witness. It grew from repetition across years and communities. Fishermen could mention her. Hunters could scan for her. Pilots and traders could wonder if the dark shape ahead might be the old drifter again. In that way, the coast itself became part of her story. She belonged to a landscape of fog, sea ice, sudden weather, and long memory. To outsiders, she was a sensational ghost ship. To those living closer to her track, she was almost a seasonal possibility. One more reminder that northern waters do not always finish what they begin. The HMS Resolute was abandoned in ice, then sailed home. Few ship stories sound so much like a fable, and yet are so firmly historical. HMS Resolute was one of the British vessels sent to search for Sir John Franklin in the Arctic. In 1854, after brutal ice conditions trapped the squadron, crews were ordered to abandon several ships and retreat over the frozen world they had entered by choice. That should have been the end. Instead, one abandoned vessel broke free months later and began drifting south. An American whaling ship eventually found her alive in the water, battered but serviceable. Here is the astonishing part. She was not merely salvaged for scrap. She was recognized, recovered, and ultimately returned to Britain as a diplomatic gesture. So a ship left helpless in polar ice completed a kind of second career by crossing from imperial search mission into international symbol. Most ghost ships become lonely legends. This one became a reminder that the sea can return what human beings have already mourned. An American whaler found the Resolute drifting free in the Arctic. The rescue of the vessel began with sharp eyes and maritime nerve. In September of 1855, the American whaler George Henry came upon a ship moving free in Davis Strait. She had no crew and no guiding hand, yet she was afloat and recoverable. That alone would have been remarkable. But the whaler's captain understood that this was not anonymous wreckage. The ship belonged to one of the British Arctic expeditions, and bringing her in would require seamanship, labor, and judgment in difficult waters. A salvage crew was placed aboard. They worked the abandoned vessel south through weather and uncertainty until she reached a safer port. There is something deeply satisfying in that image. An explorer ship, lost to ice and empire, is reclaimed not by a navy in triumph, but by working whalermen earning a living in harsh seas. The The episode also shows that ghost ships were not always ends in themselves. Sometimes they became dramatic recoveries shaped by skill rather than fear. A desk made from resolute timbers still symbolizes diplomacy today. The vessel's story did not end when she was returned. Years later, when the ship was finally broken up, part of her oak was crafted into furniture, including the famous Resolute desk. That desk was presented by Queen Victoria to the President of the United States in the 19th century, and it remains one of the most recognized pieces of furniture in political history. This is a remarkable transformation. Wood that once groaned under Arctic pressure drifted abandoned through northern waters and survived salvage, now sits at the center of modern state power. It is history compressed into timber. Every scratch of a pen across that surface takes place on material that lived a far harsher life before entering ceremony and symbolism. Most ghost ships leave stories in archives or on wreck charts. This one left a physical object that still participates in public life. It means the long arc of polar exploration, abandonment, rescue, and reconciliation can still be touched in a room far from ice. Franklin's lost ships became the most haunting Arctic search in history. When Sir John Franklin sailed in 1845 to complete the Northwest Passage, Britain treated the voyage as one more grand imperial challenge. Then both ships disappeared. What followed was not one failed search, but a decades-long obsession that sent expedition after expedition into the Arctic. The scale of the response is part of what makes the story so powerful. Naval officers, private sponsors, American allies, and later independent searchers all tried to solve the same silence. Maps were expanded. New routes were tested. Hard evidence came in scraps: a campsite, a message cairn, scattered relics, human remains, Inuit testimony. The search became its own era of exploration. Franklin's vanished ships were no longer just missing vessels. They had become the dark center of an international effort filled with courage, suffering, pride, and grief. Few ghost ship stories changed geography and public imagination so deeply. Their absence pulled people northward for years, and each failed answer only made the mystery larger. Erebus and Terror vanished while chasing the Northwest Passage dream. The two ships at the heart of the Franklin disaster carried names that feel almost too fitting: HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, yet they were formidable expedition vessels, reinforced for polar service, and loaded with supplies for years. Their goal was one of the great prizes of 19th century exploration: a navigable route through the Arctic, linking the Atlantic and Pacific. Success promised glory, trade advantage, and national prestige. Instead, the ships entered the high north and disappeared from European sight forever. That failure struck so deeply because these were not fragile improvisations. They represented the confidence of a global empire, the belief that discipline, technology, and planning could master frozen geography. The Arctic answered with silence. Long after the men were gone, the names of the two ships retained immense power. They captured the collision between ambition and environment more vividly than almost any other maritime story. The dream of passage was real. So was the cost of pursuing it too far. For generations, the Franklin expedition was known only through silence. What made the Franklin mystery uniquely haunting was not merely disaster, but the length of uncertainty that followed it. The years, then decades, families, officials, and the wider public knew almost nothing definite. There was no returned survivor to tell the story. No final harbor report. No clear wreck site. Instead, there was silence broken only by fragments. A note left in a cairn revealed that Franklin had died and the ships were abandoned. Inuit witnesses described starving white men, boats dragged over ice, and strange, desperate scenes. Relics surfaced in scattered places, but never enough to build a complete narrative. This long silence changed the emotional texture of the event. It became less a single catastrophe than a wound history could not close. Every generation inherited part of the mystery and handed it on. That is why the expedition lived so strongly in public memory. It was not just lost. It remained lost, with the Arctic withholding its full answer long after everyone involved had passed into history. Ice, scurvy, and lead poisoning stalked Franklin's doomed expedition. The Franklin disaster was not the work of a single blow. It was a slow tightening of misery. First came the ice, which trapped the ships and turned them from engines of progress into prisons. Then came scurvy, the old naval killer, creeping in as stored food lost what the human body desperately needed. Gums swelled. Strength faded. Wounds stopped healing. On top of that, many researchers now believe the men were also weakened by heavy exposure to lead, likely from tinned provisions and possibly the ship's water system. Lead does not kill with drama at first. It clouds judgment, harms the nerves, and erodes the body from within. That matters terribly in the Arctic, where clear thinking could decide whether a party found shelter or walked into death. What makes the story so chilling is that the men were not defeated by one sudden catastrophe. They were worn down by cold, hunger, illness, and poison, all at once. Inuit testimony preserved clues that Victorian searchers often ignored. For years, some of the most important evidence about Franklin's fate came from Inuit witnesses who had seen abandoned camps, encountered starving explorers, or handled objects from the lost expedition. Their accounts described ships caught in ice, men dragging boats over land, and desperate movement across a world the British barely understood. Yet many Victorian searchers treated these reports with skepticism or pushed them aside because they did not fit imperial assumptions about who counted as a reliable observer. That refusal cost history dearly. Inuit communities knew the region in a practical and intimate way. They read sea ice, travel routes, animal patterns, and survival conditions with a depth outsiders could rarely match. They were not guessing from a distance. They were describing events within their own world. What makes this so striking now is that later discoveries often supported key parts of their testimony. The Arctic was speaking through people who knew it best, and for too long, the Empire chose not to listen. Wrecks of Erebus and Terror were finally found in Canadian waters. For more than a century and a half, the lost ships of Franklin's expedition seemed almost mythical, famous enough to haunt the imagination, yet physically absent. Then, the Arctic finally gave some of them back. Erebus was found in 2014, and Terror followed in 2016, both in waters long connected to Inuit knowledge. The discoveries were extraordinary, not only because they solved a geographical mystery, but because they turned legend back into material history. After generations of maps marked with question marks, the ships had actual resting places on the seafloor. Their rediscovery felt like hearing an echo from 1845 suddenly answer. It also changed the emotional scale of the story. These were no longer only names from tragic reports. They were real vessels, with cabins, decks, fittings, and human decisions still waiting inside the wrecks. The sea had hidden them for so long that finding them felt less like archaeology and more like reopening a sealed century. Terror's remains revealed a ship astonishingly well preserved below. When explorers located the wreck of Terror, what amazed many people was not only that it had been found, but how intact it appeared. resting in cold Arctic water. The vessel looked eerily composed, almost as though it had been set down carefully rather than shattered by violence. Her hull remained upright. Windows still showed in place. Parts of the deck structure survived. The preservation carried an unsettling power because it made the ship feel less like debris and more like a waiting interior, a contained world whose occupants had stepped away only yesterday. Cold water can slow decay, and the Arctic had acted almost like a guardian of the wreck. That preservation matters historically because it raises the possibility of recovering details that written records never gave us. But it matters emotionally too. To see a lost ship endure so long in darkness is to feel history become immediate. The vessel does not look finished. It looks paused, and that is far more haunting. The Octavius legend tells of a captain frozen at his desk. Few ghost ship tales are more vivid than the story of the Octavius. According to the legend, a whaling vessel found her drifting in Arctic waters in the late 18th century. When the boarding party entered, they discovered the entire crew dead from cold. Most haunting of all was the captain, said to be seated at his desk with pen in hand, as if he had frozen while still trying to command the final moments of the voyage. It is easy to understand why this story spread. The image is unforgettable. It compresses isolation, ambition, and sudden stillness into one scene. A man writes, "Winter enters. Time stops. The ship keeps moving." Whether true or not, the tale captures a fear sailors understood deeply, that the sea could preserve a final instant so perfectly that the dead seemed not gone, only interrupted. It also reflects the special terror of polar waters, where death could arrive not with noise, but with silence. No one has ever proved the Octavius story truly happened. That uncertainty is part of what gives the tale its strange power. Unlike better documented maritime cases, the Octavius has no solid trail of official records, logs, port evidence, or contemporary reports strong enough to anchor the story in firm history. It appears more like a legend built from details people wanted to believe because they were so perfectly chilling. That does not make it unimportant. In some ways, it makes it even more revealing. The tale shows what audiences found irresistible in a ghost ship story. Frozen bodies, a captain still at work, an impossible drift through northern seas. It is like folklore assembled from the strongest pieces of maritime fear. The uncertain truth also invites us to notice how sea legends are made. A compelling image can travel farther than a verified event. It can survive without proof because it satisfies something deeper than curiosity. It gives form to dread. The story may be uncertain, but the emotion it carries is unmistakably real. The Flying Dutchman began as a sailor's warning, not a ship. Before it hardened into the image of one cursed vessel, the Flying Dutchman was more like a message carried through oral tradition. Sailors used the name to describe an impossible sight and the danger it implied. It was a warning wrapped in a story. Somewhere beyond the next wall of rain or mist, a ship might appear that no prudent seaman wanted to meet. In that early form, the tale mattered less as biography and more as omen. It taught that the sea could deceive the eye and punish arrogance. A captain who tried to round a stormy cape against fate, God, or nature might be condemned to sail forever. That moral structure is important. The story did not begin as random spookiness. It emerged from a working world where weather, pride, and discipline could determine life or death. The phantom vessel was therefore not just something sailors feared seeing. It was something they feared becoming, a ship trapped forever beyond safe harbor and human mercy. Sightings of the Flying Dutchman were often linked to storms. That connection makes perfect sense when you think like a sailor. Storms reduce visibility, distort distance, and turn every light or outline into something unstable. A vessel glimpsed through rain curtains or lightning flashes can seem to appear and disappear unnaturally. Add exhaustion, tension, and the knowledge that bad weather kills, and the mind becomes ready to see meaning in any strange shape on the horizon. This is one reason the Flying Dutchman became tied so closely to tempests. It did not belong to calm seas and clear daylight. It belonged to moments when nature already felt close to fury. In such conditions, a phantom ship was more than a curiosity. It could feel like judgment arriving. Reports often placed the apparition near dangerous headlands and storm-beaten waters, especially around the Cape of Good Hope. That setting gave the legend force. The sea itself seemed to stage the sighting, using cloud, spray, and terror to create a warming people would never forget. Even royalty once reported seeing the Flying Dutchman at sea. One reason the legend endured so strongly is that it was not confined to old folksal tales. In the late 19th century, the future King George V, then a young naval officer, recorded that he and others had seen a strange, luminous vessel identified as the Flying Dutchman during a voyage near Australia. Whether the sighting was a misperception, an atmospheric effect, or something embroidered later hardly matters to the legend's survival. What matters is that educated observers, including men from the highest ranks of society, were willing to describe the experience seriously. That gave the old tale fresh authority. It suggested that even disciplined naval eyes could be caught by whatever the sea was showing. The story also gained an eerie aftertaste, because one sailor who reportedly saw the apparition later died from a fall that same day, which only strengthened the old belief that such visions foretold death. In that way, royal attention did not tame the legend. It enlarged it. Phantom ship legends thrived wherever oceans were dangerous and unknown. Ghost ship stories are not evenly distributed across the map. They cluster where mariners faced fog, reefs, violent weather, strange currents, and long distances from help. In such places, uncertainty itself became a living force. A coastline could swallow vessels with no witnesses. A bank of mist could hide rocks until the hull struck. A storm could erase an entire crew and leave only broken rumor behind. That is the world in which phantom ship legends flourish. They are most at home where people have strong reasons to fear what they cannot fully see. This is why versions of the same basic idea appear in very different maritime cultures. The names change. The waters change, but the structure remains familiar. A ship appears where it should not. It carries warning, doom, or mystery. These tales are cultural maps of danger. They tell us where fear lived in the maritime imagination, and they remind us that unknown water has always been one of humanity's greatest stages for storytelling. Sailors feared ghost ships as omens of death or disaster. For people who worked at sea before modern forecasting and instant communication, the ocean often felt like a place where signs mattered. A sudden change in wind, an odd color in the sky, a flock of birds moving strangely, all could feel meaningful. Within that world, an empty or phantom vessel was not just unsettling. It could seem prophetic. If a ship appeared where it should not be, or if one was found deserted under eerie circumstances, many sailors believed it spoke of something still approaching. Maybe a storm, maybe a wreck, maybe death aboard their own vessel. This belief was strengthened by coincidence, which the sea provides in abundance. A strange sighting before bad weather becomes unforgettable. A curious encounter before a man dies becomes proof. Over time, such patterns harden into conviction. That is what made ghost ships so powerful in sailor culture. They were not merely stories for entertainment. They were woven into the emotional weather of the sea, where fear often arrived before explanation. Fata Morgana mirages could make distant ships look supernatural. One of the strangest natural forces behind phantom ship stories is a mirage called Fata Morgana. It happens when layers of cold and warm air bend light in unusual ways, especially over water. A ship beyond the horizon can be stretched, lifted, distorted, or stacked into bizarre shapes that seem to hover above the sea. Masts become towers. Hulls appear elongated or suspended. The result can look less like an ordinary vessel than a floating castle or an impossible craft from another world. For sailors who did not know the optics involved, the effect could be deeply convincing. Even today, photographs of such mirages look uncanny. What makes this so fascinating is that the atmosphere is not inventing something from nothing. It is reshaping reality just enough to make it feel unreal. That thin border between truth and illusion is where many sea legends are born. A real ship exists somewhere beyond sight, but what the eye receives is strange enough to become a ghost. Moonlight and fog often transformed ordinary vessels into terrifying apparitions. At sea, light rarely behaves as it does on land. Moonlight can flatten distance, silver the waves, and strip away familiar detail. Fog then enters like a moving war, revealing one fragment while swallowing the rest. Under those conditions, an ordinary vessel can become almost unbearable to behold. A few pale sails gleam. The hull disappears. A lantern shines where no deck seems to exist. The ship glides silently because wind and distance erase sound. That is all it takes. The mind begins finishing the picture, and what it finishes may be far stranger than what is really there. This is why so many ghost ship encounters happen at night or in murky half-light. Darkness does not merely hide things. It edits them. It presents the sea in fragments and dares the imagination to join them together. Sailors knew this from experience, yet knowledge did not cancel fear. If anything, it sharpened it, because they understood how little certainty the night could offer. A ship seen upside down to become a perfect sea legend. Some atmospheric mirages do more than blur or stretch a vessel. They can invert it. Under specific conditions, light bends in such a way that a distant ship appears upside down, hovering strangely above the horizon. To anyone unfamiliar with the physics, that sight would be unforgettable. It would not look like weather. It would look impossible. And impossible things at sea rarely stay simple for long. They become stories, then warnings, then folklore. This kind of inversion helps explain why some phantom ship accounts sound so bizarre, even when they may have begun with a perfectly real vessel. The ocean horizon is already a place where scale is difficult to judge and certainty is fragile. An upside-down ship pushes that uncertainty into the realm of the uncanny. It feels like the world itself has slipped. That is fertile ground for legend. A sailor who saw such a thing would not need embroidery to make the tale memorable. Nature had already done the work. Quarantined ships sometimes drifted empty after disease tore crews apart. Disease at sea created a special kind of terror because it could hollow out a vessel from within before land ever appeared. If fever, cholera, or another fast-moving illness struck, a ship might become a floating ward, then a floating grave. Survivors could die, flee, or be removed under emergency conditions, leaving the vessel itself still afloat, but emptied of ordinary life. In some cases, such ships were kept at a distance from ports, treated as dangerous objects before anyone even knew exactly what had happened aboard. That gave them an almost supernatural reputation. a drifting vessel was frightening enough. A drifting vessel associated with contagion was worse, because it threatened the living simply by nearing them. Maritime quarantine history is full of scenes where fear outran knowledge. Authorities hesitated. Locals panicked. Rumors multiplied. The result was a new kind of ghost ship, not born from phantom sighting or lost exploration, but from illness moving silently through cramped decks where nowhere felt safely far enough away. Plague once made abandoned vessels objects of fear in every port. In earlier centuries, plague transformed the meaning of arrival. A ship entering harbor did not automatically bring trade or news. It might bring death. Ports developed quarantine systems because they had good reason to fear vessels from infected regions, yet fear often exceeded evidence. A ship suspected of carrying plague could be treated almost like a cursed object, watched from shore with dread, and kept at strict distance. If such a vessel drifted or appeared without clear command, terror deepened immediately. People did not merely wonder what had happened aboard. They wondered whether the ship itself had become a carrier of invisible disaster. That is one reason plague stories attach so strongly to ghost ship lore. They combine visible emptiness with invisible danger. A deserted deck already invites the imagination to ask where everyone went. Add plague to the picture, and the answer becomes more horrifying than mutiny or storm. The ship is no longer just abandoned. It is feared as a floating boundary between safety and catastrophe. Leprosy and cholera ships inspired some of history's darkest rumors. Certain diseases carried not only medical fear, but social dread and moral stigma. Leprosy and cholera did this with particular force. Both could turn a ship into an object of rumor long before any careful investigation took place. Cholera's speed was terrifying. A crew or passenger group could be healthy, then desperately ill, within a brutally short span. Leprosy inspired different fears, slower and often crueler, because it was so heavily burdened with misunderstanding and exclusion. In maritime lore, ships connected with such illnesses became natural magnets for dark storytelling. People imagined crews dying unattended, vessels denied entry to port, and desperate souls left between sea and shore with nowhere to belong. Some of these tales were exaggerated, but they reveal a lot about how societies reacted to sickness. Disease at sea stripped away the comforting illusion that danger was always visible. A ship could look calm from the outside while carrying terror inside, and that made rumor spread almost as quickly as infection. War created ghost ships when crews fled burning or sinking vessels. Battle can produce some of the most haunting abandoned ships of all, because the process happens so violently and so fast. A shell strikes. Fire races through passageways. Smoke fills compartments. The crew is ordered off while the vessel still floats, or men jump because staying means certain death. In those moments, a ship stops being a command and becomes an object left to momentum, wind, and flame. During major wars, this happened again and again. Damaged merchantmen drifted after submarine attacks. Naval vessels burned through the night with no one left aboard. Some later sank in silence. Others kept moving, blackened and empty, becoming accidental ghost ships born directly from industrial warfare. There is something especially chilling about these cases because they carry the shape of modern power. Steel, engines, radios, weapons, all suddenly reduced to a deserted hull on open water. War stripped ships of their crews in an instant and left the sea to finish what battle began. Naval battles sometimes left damaged ships drifting unmanned for days. In the chaos of battle, a ship did not always sink where it was hit. Sometimes it survived long enough to become something stranger. Crews might be killed, evacuated, or transferred under pressure while the vessel remained afloat, damaged but not finished. Then currents and wind took over. Such warships could drift for hours or days, carrying smashed guns, scorched decks, and the eerie silence that follows violence. The image is powerful because naval battle is usually imagined as noise and impact. Yet some of its most haunting aftermaths were quiet. A vessel that had recently been full of orders, alarms, and men at work might later be found empty, moving without intention across a changed sea. These drifting remnants also complicated rescue and strategy. They could mislead lookouts, threaten navigation, or become targets again. History remembers the explosions, but the drifting aftermath deserves attention too. It is the moment when machinery outlasts command, and the battle's human center has already gone. Fire at sea could empty a ship in only minutes. A blaze aboard ship has always been one of the mariner's worst nightmares, because the environment offers almost no easy escape. At sea, fire traps people between heat and water. Tarred rigging, timber, paint, cargo, fuel, and wind can turn a manageable flame into catastrophe with terrifying speed. Once smoke fills confined spaces, orientation fails. Orders become harder to hear. Panic rises. A crew may launch boats or leap over the side long before the vessel actually sinks. That is how a burning or recently burned ship can become a ghost ship so quickly. The human presence is forced off in a rush, while the structure remains, glowing, drifting, or smoldering across the water. Such scenes were unforgettable to witnesses because they reversed the normal logic of danger. The ship still existed, often visibly and dramatically, but the life that animated it had been expelled in minutes. Fire did not merely damage vessels. It could strip them of humanity almost instantly. Insurance fraud sometimes disguised deliberate abandonment as an eerie mystery. Not every ghost ship began with tragedy. Some began with calculation. A failing vessel, a desperate owner, and a generous insurance policy could produce a temptation as old as commerce itself. If a ship vanished at the right moment or was found drifting under suspicious circumstances, money might replace the profit that an honest voyage could no longer earn. That possibility haunted maritime investigators because the sea destroys evidence beautifully. Logs go missing. Fire blurs cause and effect. Crews can claim panic, storm damage, or sudden danger, then disappear into other ports under new names. In some cases, owners were accused of over-insuring weak ships and quietly arranging their loss. The result was a strange hybrid of crime and legend. An abandoned vessel might look like a supernatural puzzle when it was really part of a financial scheme. That possibility makes some ghost ships even more fascinating, because beneath the empty deck, there may be not a haunting, but a plan. Mutiny could turn a working vessel into a silent, drifting shell. A ship at sea depended on hierarchy more completely than almost any place on land. Orders had to be trusted. Discipline had to hold. If that structure broke, the vessel could change character in a single night. Mutiny was not always dramatic in the way films imagine it. Sometimes it began with resentment over food, pay, punishment, or a captain's competence. Then a confrontation came. Officers might be overpowered, killed, or set adrift. The ship itself could be seized, redirected, or stripped of the very people who knew how to run it safely. That is how a functioning vessel could become eerily empty. A mutinous crew might flee in boats, abandon the ship after damage, or vanish into another port while the original vessel wandered on. What makes this so gripping is the intimacy of it. Storms and reefs are impersonal. Mutiny is human collapse in close quarters, where fear, anger, and power turn a ship into a drifting aftermath. Piracy often erased crews and left ships to wander alone. Pirates did not always sink what they captured. Sometimes they wanted cargo, supplies, charts, or valuables, and once those were taken, the vessel itself became disposable. A robbed ship might be stripped of people as well as goods, left with no one aboard to navigate her, repair her, or explain what had happened. In heavily traveled waters, such a derelict could become a deeply unsettling sight. From a distance, it still looked like a ship underway. Up close, it was only the shell of one. Piracy also encouraged rumor because witnesses were often scarce and survivors were not guaranteed. An empty vessel found after a raid might say almost nothing clearly. Was the crew murdered? Taken captive? Forced into pirate service? Set off in boats? The uncertainty gave these cases their dark edge. Piracy did not need the supernatural to create ghost ships. It simply removed the human story and left the object behind, still floating, but emptied of command and identity. Storm-damaged rudders could leave ships circling like trapped spirits. A ship without a working rudder is not truly free. She may still have sail, buoyancy, and motion, but direction begins to fail. In heavy weather, that failure can produce an eerie spectacle. Instead of making progress, the vessel may yaw, drift, or circle repeatedly under the push of wind and sea. To an observer, especially in low visibility, it can look as though the ship is trapped in its own pattern, unable to escape a patch of water. That image is one reason damaged vessels so often inspired ghostly descriptions. They appeared animated, yet strangely purposeless. Before modern distress systems, a rudder failure far from help could be catastrophic, even if the hull remained sound. The crew might attempt repairs, launch boats, or be swept away in the struggle, leaving the crippled ship to continue its haunting rotation alone. There is something unforgettable about that vision. A vessel still obedient to nature, but no longer obedient to human intention. A broken mast could doom survivors without sinking the ship. People often imagine maritime disaster as total wreckage, but sometimes the fatal damage was narrower and crueler. A broken mast could transform a seaworthy vessel into a drifting problem almost instantly. In the age of sail, masts were not decorative structures. They were movement, control, and hope. If a mast came down in heavy weather, it could tear rigging, smash boats, injure crew, and drag dangerously alongside the hull. Cutting it free took strength and nerve. Even if the ship survived the immediate chaos, she might then lie crippled, unable to make headway or reach safety before water, food, or morale ran low. Rescue could be far away. The sea around her might remain rough. That is how a vessel could become a ghost ship without ever properly wrecking. The ship still floated. The people simply lost the means to command her future. Few details reveal the fragility of old seafaring more clearly than one mast falling at the wrong moment. Some ghost ships were discovered with animals still alive aboard. Nothing sharpens the eeriness of an abandoned ship like finding living creatures still moving through the silence. In several famous cases, rescuers came aboard expecting emptiness and instead found cats, dogs, chickens, canaries, or other animals left behind. That detail hits hard because animals do not explain anything. They deepen the human absence. A dog waiting on an empty deck suggests loyalty without rescue. A caged bird still alive suggests time passing in a sealed world after people were gone. These survivors also tell investigators something practical. Departure may have been sudden. There may have been no time, space, or intention to gather every living thing before abandoning ship. Yet the emotional effect goes well beyond evidence. The presence of animals makes the vessel feel recently inhabited and cruelly interrupted. The routines of feeding, companionship, and daily life are still faintly visible. When humans vanish and animals remain, the silence becomes more than mysterious. It becomes painfully personal. Deserted yachts became modern ghost ships in the age of radio. Ghost ships did not disappear when the world became modern. They simply changed shape. Instead of square riggers and Arctic explorers, the 20th century produced abandoned yachts and small motor vessels fitted with radios, engines, and modern gear. That made their mysteries feel even stranger. With radio aboard, how could no distress call explain the crisis? With charts, engines, and better forecasting, how could a vessel still become an empty drifter? Modern abandoned craft carry a different emotional charge from older cases. They feel closer to us. The cabins look familiar. The equipment seems reassuring. Yet when they are found empty, all that modern confidence collapses at once. The electronics are still there. The life jackets may still hang in place. A meal may still be on the counter. The gap between capability and outcome becomes the mystery. These yachts remind us that technology reduces danger, but it does not erase the sea's power to produce silence, confusion, and disappearance. The Kaz-2 was found adrift with its crew missing. In 2007, a catamaran called Kaz-2 was discovered off Australia in conditions that seemed almost designed to provoke unease. The yacht was under power. A table had been set. A laptop was on. The radio worked. Life jackets remained aboard. Yet the 3 men who had been sailing her were gone. There was no sign of violent struggle and no simple explanation waiting in the cabin. The ordinary details are what make this case so gripping. It did not look like a vessel after catastrophe. It looked like a vessel in the middle of life. That distinction matters. The scene suggested interruption rather than destruction. Investigators considered possibilities such as one man going overboard and the others entering the water in a failed rescue attempt. But certainty never arrived. In an age of engines, communication equipment, and coastal surveillance, the empty yacht felt unnervingly old-fashioned. It was a modern boat that had slipped backward into the classic grammar of ghost ship mystery. The Joyita drifted half-sunken, yet stubbornly refused to disappear. When the merchant vessel Joyita was found in the South Pacific in 1955, she seemed caught between wreck and survival. The ship rode low, badly flooded, and listing hard, yet she stayed afloat. That was not an accident. She had cork lining and built-in buoyancy that made her unusually hard to sink. The visual effect must have been extraordinary. Here was a vessel that looked half defeated, but still refused to go under. Her appearance only deepened the mystery because the people aboard were missing. 25 passengers and crew had vanished from a ship that, however damaged, remained stubbornly alive on the water. That contradiction is central to her legend. A ship that sinks explains itself with brutal clarity. A ship that survives without its people forces harder questions. Why leave it? What emergency seemed worse than staying? The Joyita became unforgettable because she looked less like a wreck than a survivor, drifting on without those who had trusted her. 25 people vanished from Joyita without a clear answer. The scale of the disappearance is what gives this case such force. One missing sailor can be tragic. 25 missing people from a vessel that was later found afloat becomes something much darker. The Joyita had left Samoa for Tokla with cargo, passengers and crew, then failed to arrive. When she was eventually located, there was damage, flooding and equipment missing, but not enough to make the loss feel simple. Boats, records, and some emergency gear were gone. So were all the people. Investigators built theories around engine trouble, poor communications, panic, and abandonment under false assumptions, yet none fully satisfied the imagination. A group that large suggests shared decision-making, pressure, and collective fear. It means many minds confronted the same problem and still arrived at a result that remains opaque from the outside. That is why this story lingers. It is not only about disappearance. It is about an entire human community leaving a vessel behind and leaving no final certainty. The Joyita's clocks had stopped, but its radio was tuned. Among the details that make the vessel so haunting are the small technical traces of interrupted effort. Clocks aboard had stopped, suggesting the gradual failure of power or mechanism during the ordeal. Yet the radio was set to the emergency frequency, which hints that someone had tried to reach help, or at least expected the need to do so. These are not dramatic clues in themselves. That is exactly why they are powerful. They feel authentic. They place real people inside the unfolding problem, checking systems, hoping for contact, and watching time begin to slip away. The tuned radio is especially evocative because it represents intention. Someone turned that dial while the situation was worsening. Someone believed rescue might still answer. When you pair that with silent clocks, the entire vessel begins to feel like a room where action stalled just short of success. Few images capture maritime helplessness more sharply than that combination, a call prepared for the world, and time failing anyway. The MV Ching was found burning and abandoned in the Pacific. In 2008, the Taiwanese fishing vessel Tai Ching was discovered in flames near Kiribati with no crew aboard. Fire at sea is frightening enough. Fire without people intensifies the scene into something almost theatrical. Smoke rises. The hull burns. The ocean stretches calm or indifferent around it. Yet the human center is missing. Reports suggested that a fire may have broken out aboard, forcing the 29 crew members to abandon ship in life rafts or smaller craft. Their later rescue removed part of the mystery, but not the ghostly power of the image itself. What makes this case stand out is how quickly an active industrial vessel could be transformed into a blazing derelict, still moving through open water after its social life had been stripped away. It shows that a ghost ship does not have to remain unexplained forever to feel uncanny. Sometimes the sight alone is enough, a working ship turned into an empty furnace on the Pacific. The High Aim 6 became a modern ghost ship of mutiny. This fishing vessel entered legend not because of storms or supernatural rumors, but because crime and mutiny shaped its course. In 2003, the boat was found drifting in Australian waters under suspicious circumstances. The men aboard gave shifting explanations, and investigators eventually uncovered a much darker background. The original Taiwanese captain had reportedly been killed, and control of the vessel had changed hands in violence. By the time authorities entered the story, the ship had already passed through a period of eerie half-abandonment, its identity clouded and its lawful command broken. That combination is what gives the case such force. It feels modern in its geography and policing, yet ancient in its basic structure. A ship at sea becomes cut off from normal authority. Power changes hands violently. The vessel continues onward carrying silence, fear, and lies. In that sense, the High Aim 6 belongs firmly in ghost ship history, a reminder that criminal human drama can still hollow out a vessel as effectively as any storm. The Jianseng drifted near Australia with no owner identified. In 2006, Australian authorities found a large tanker drifting off the coast of Queensland, and the case immediately felt uncanny because so little about the ship could be pinned down. The vessel appeared deserted. There was no crew to question and no straightforward paperwork trail leading to an owner. Even its purpose remained murky. At first glance, it looked like a substantial commercial craft, the kind of ship that should leave a clear bureaucratic wake across ports, registries, and supply networks. Instead, it seemed to have slipped free of identity itself. That is what made the Jianseng so compelling. It was not only an empty ship. It was an empty ship without a satisfying paper life. Modern maritime commerce depends on records, insurance, flags, and chains of accountability. When a vessel that size drifts in without them, it feels like a hole has opened in the system. The mystery was not only who had left it, but how it had hidden in plain sight. Authorities never proved where the mysterious Jianseng came from. That lingering uncertainty is what lifted the case beyond ordinary salvage and into the realm of modern maritime folklore. Investigators were able to inspect the vessel, tow it, and examine its features, yet its full story remained stubbornly incomplete. There were suggestions that it might have supported illegal fishing fleets. There were guesses about foreign ownership and quiet abandonment. There were practical theories about how an aging tanker could become economically inconvenient enough to discard. But a complete, satisfying origin never emerged in public view. In a world dense with satellites, shipping registries, and customs systems, that feels almost impossible, which is why the story grips so strongly. It suggests that even modern oceans still contain blind spaces where accountability thins out. A ship can still appear as a question mark. The mystery is less gothic than older ghost ship tales, but no less fascinating. The vessel became a symbol of maritime anonymity, proof that the sea can still hide not only people, but paperwork, motive, and origin. The SS Valencia inspired tales of lifeboats and phantom survivors. The Valencia wrecked off Vancouver Island in 1906 after running onto rocks in foul conditions. And the disaster immediately gained a grim reputation because the rescue effort was chaotic, the coastline unforgiving, and the loss of life terrible. In the years that followed, the ship's story did not stay confined to official reports. It expanded into legend. Accounts spread of lifeboats connected to the disaster appearing long after the wreck, and of ghostly survivors or spectral scenes near the coast. That growth makes sense once you understand the setting. The ship was lost in a region already feared for wrecks, crashing surf, and poor visibility. Tragedy there felt almost unfinished by nature. The human imagination stepped in and extended it. The Valencia became one of those disasters that never quite stopped happening in public memory. Each later rumor seemed to suggest that the dead had not entirely left the shoreline and that the sea was still rehearsing the event. Wreckage from the Valencia appeared years after the disaster itself. One reason the story refused to die was that the ocean kept returning fragments. After the wreck, pieces connected to the vessel continued to appear along the coast, sometimes long after people expected the event to have passed into history. Every new item carried an emotional charge greater than its size. A broken boat, a float, a section of debris, each seemed to reopen the disaster. The sea was not done speaking. This matters because ghost ship legends often thrive when time behaves strangely. If evidence arrives all at once, the narrative stabilizes. If it arrives in eerie installments across years, the event begins to feel less resolved and more haunted. That is exactly what happened here. The coast kept offering reminders, and each reminder gave rumor fresh energy. For communities near the wreck, the disaster remained physically present. It was not only a story told in the past tense. It was something the shoreline itself seemed unwilling to release. Some said Valencia's ghost lifeboat reappeared with skeletons still seated. This is one of the darkest stories ever to attach itself to a wreck, and its power comes from how precise the image is. According to later legend, a lifeboat linked to the disaster was discovered years afterward with skeletons still in place inside it. Whether true or not, the story spread because it perfectly distilled the horror of maritime waiting. A boat meant for rescue becomes a drifting tomb. Bodies remain seated as if still expecting help that never arrived. It is almost too vivid not to survive in memory. Historically, such tales often grow where grief, delay, and fragmentary evidence meet. The Valencia disaster created exactly that environment. The legend may not stand on firm proof, but it reveals how people processed the scale of the tragedy. They imagined the dead not simply lost, but held in suspension by the sea. That is what gives the story its lasting chill. It transforms survival equipment into one final, terrible tableau. The Orang Medan story remains one of radio's strangest sea legends. Few maritime stories fuse technology and horror as effectively as the tale of the Orang Medan. According to the legend, distress messages were received from a ship in Southeast Asian waters describing death aboard in terrifyingly direct terms. When rescuers reached the vessel, they supposedly found the crew dead, with expressions of fear fixed on their faces. Then, before the mystery could be fully examined, the ship caught fire and exploded, vanishing beneath the sea. It is almost perfectly constructed for the 20th century. Radio carries the warning. Modern rescue arrives too late. Evidence appears, then destroys itself. That structure is why the story has endured so strongly, even though historians have serious doubts about its documentation. It feels like an old ghost ship legend updated for the wireless age. Instead of phantom sails in fog, the haunting now arrives through static and signal. The result is a story that sounds both mechanical and supernatural, a classic maritime nightmare translated into radio language. The famous death message from Orang Medan may be invented. That possibility does not weaken the legend. In some ways, it explains why the story is so effective. The reported message is brief, vivid, and terrifying in exactly the right way. It sounds like something designed to be repeated, a perfect fragment of dread that can survive in retelling even if its source remains uncertain. Researchers have long struggled to trace the case through reliable shipping records, official reports, and contemporary documentation. The gaps are serious enough that many now suspect the tale was embellished heavily or created outright. Yet the story survives because it speaks to a modern fear that earlier ghost ship legends could not touch. A voice reaches out through technology at the edge of death, then goes silent forever. That is profoundly unsettling. Even if invented, the message captures the emotional logic of maritime horror in the radio age. A signal arrives from open water. It promises explanation. Instead, it leaves only atmosphere, rumor, and a silence more memorable than proof. Even false ghost ship tales reveal what sailors feared most. A made-up ghost ship is never truly about nothing. Even when a tale cannot be proved, it still preserves the shape of real fear. Sailors invented stories out of what pressed hardest on the mind at sea. Storms that arrived too fast, ships that vanished over the horizon, captains who pushed too far, and the possibility of dying unseen. That is why false tales matter. They act like emotional maps of maritime life. One legend may focus on endless wandering because being lost was terrifying. Another may center on a dead crew because disease and isolation were constant threats. A third may involve a cursed captain because authority at sea carried enormous weight. In each case, the invented details point back toward something genuine. The story may not be true, but the fear inside it usually is. That is what makes maritime folklore so valuable. It shows us what sailors worried about when the sea was dark and the future looked uncertain. The seabird was said to beach itself with breakfast waiting. Among New England's strangest maritime legends is the tale of the Seabird, a vessel said to have sailed onto shore in Rhode Island in the 18th century with no one aboard. According to the story, everything suggested recent human presence. Breakfast was still prepared. Daily life seemed paused rather than destroyed. The ship had not arrived as wreckage. It had arrived as an unanswered question. That image is exactly why the tale survived. A vessel running aground is ordinary enough. A vessel doing so in a state of eerie domestic interruption is unforgettable. It turns the shoreline into a stage and the ship into a scene. Historians treat the account cautiously, and details shifted over time, yet the story endured because it captures a perfect ghost ship mood. The sea does not always return broken things. Sometimes, in legend at least, it returns something almost complete, as though the people have only stepped away for a moment and failed to return. New England coastlines collected stories of ships arriving without souls. The shores of New England were ideal ground for ghost ship lore because they combined heavy traffic, dangerous weather, rocky approaches, and a culture already saturated with seafaring memory. Here, ships were not distant abstractions. They were work, family, wealth, migration, and risk. So when a vessel arrived damaged, deserted, or under strange circumstances, the coastline was ready to absorb it into story. Fishing communities, ports, island towns, and lighthouse stations all became places where such tales could settle and grow. A drifting schooner seen offshore might be retold for decades. A wreck with uncertain details might become a local legend before the year was out. What makes this region so important is that ghost ship stories did not live only in books. They lived in conversation, inheritance, and landscape. People could point to the very waters where something had appeared. That rooted the stories in place, which made them feel less like fantasy and more like an extension of the coast's own memory. Whaling grounds produced eerie reports of vessels left to drift. Whaling sent ships into vast, cold, and often lonely waters where help might be weeks or months away. That alone made the trade fertile ground for ghost ship stories. A whaler might encounter another vessel far from normal shipping lanes, damaged, abandoned, or simply moving in ways that felt wrong. Because these grounds stretched across remote parts of the Atlantic and Pacific, any unusual sight gained force from isolation. There were fewer witnesses, slower news, and more room for dread to grow. Whaling also involved long absences and physically punishing labor, which sharpened emotion and superstition alike. Men who had spent months among ice, fog, and dangerous hunts did not need much to feel that a strange ship meant trouble. Many famous ghost ship accounts were preserved precisely because whalers were out there to find what others would never see. They served as both workers and accidental chroniclers, bringing back stories from ocean spaces where ordinary explanation often felt thin. Pack ice could trap ships so perfectly they looked simply paused. There is something uniquely haunting about a ship frozen in place. Not smashed, not sunk, not visibly ruined, just held. Pack ice can do that. It closes around a hull so completely that the vessel seems less wrecked than interrupted, as if someone has pressed pause on history itself. That visual stillness is what makes polar ghost ship stories so powerful. A trapped vessel may retain masts, boats, rigging, and even traces of daily life, while all motion drains from the scene. The ocean has become a field. The ship has become a structure inside silence. To observers, this can feel more unsettling than destruction, because the vessel still looks capable of life. It simply cannot continue. That distinction matters emotionally. A broken wreck tells you the ending happened. A trapped ship suggests the ending has not quite arrived, only stalled. In icy regions, That ambiguity could last for seasons or years, which made the vessel seem less dead than suspended between worlds. Deserted polar ships often became time capsules of daily life. When a ship is lost in warm water, decay begins quickly and relentlessly. In polar regions, the cold can slow that process so dramatically that ordinary objects survive with astonishing force. This is why deserted Arctic and Antarctic vessels often feel like time capsules. Boots may still lie near bunks. A stove may remain in place. Tools may wait where someone last set them down. The effect is intimate rather than grand. It is not only the ship that survives, but the routine inside it. That makes these vessels emotionally intense. They preserve not just exploration, but breakfast, work, boredom, and habit. You begin to sense the people who moved through the cabins without seeing them directly. Polar preservation therefore does something unusual to ghost ship history. It narrows the distance between modern imagination and vanished lives. Instead of abstract loss, you encounter a world held in cold suspension. The result is often more affecting than any dramatic ruin, because the smallest surviving detail can make absence feel immediate. Some wrecks preserved boots, books, tools, and unopened food tins. The objects left behind on abandoned ships can be more haunting than the ship itself. A boot suggests the person who wore it. A book suggests an evening at sea, a few quiet minutes before sleep. A tool suggests work interrupted. An unopened food tin suggests planning for a future that never arrived. These details matter because they shrink catastrophe down to human scale. Instead of imagining a whole crew in the abstract, you picture hands turning pages, fingers gripping cold metal, or someone setting that tin aside for tomorrow. In polar wrecks especially, such objects sometimes survive with startling clarity. They become evidence not only of disaster, but of ordinary expectation. That is what gives them emotional force. They do not belong to the dramatic climax. They belong to the life that was supposed to continue afterward. When the sea preserves them, it preserves intention itself. The ship may be a legend, but the objects whisper about real people whose plans ended mid-sentence. Abandoned exploration ships carried the loneliness of entire empires. Exploration vessels were never just transport. They carried national ambition, scientific hope, commercial dreams, and the prestige of states that wanted to plant themselves in blank spaces on the map. That is why their abandonment feels so large. When such a ship was left in ice or found deserted, the loneliness was not merely personal. It seemed to belong to an entire empire, suddenly facing its limits. The empty deck of an exploration ship can therefore feel different from the empty deck of a merchant vessel. It is loaded with intention. Charts, instruments, stores, and carefully designed cabins all speak of planning on a grand scale. Yet once the people are gone, those same symbols become evidence of failure and overreach. That contrast gives exploration ghost ships their unique power. They are monuments to confidence undone by distance, weather, and geography. A single abandoned expedition vessel can seem to hold not only missing sailors, but the silence of a nation that expected mastery and received uncertainty. Search parties often became ghost ship stories all by themselves. One of the strangest patterns in maritime history is that ships sent to solve mysteries sometimes slipped into mystery too. Search expeditions entered harsh waters already shadowed by danger, poor charts, unstable weather, and emotional pressure. They were chasing disappearances, often while carrying the hope of nations or grieving families. That made them vulnerable in more ways than one. If such a vessel became trapped, damaged, or delayed, public imagination could begin working before facts arrived. In some cases, ships sent to find Franklin, Lost whalers or missing traders were themselves abandoned or later encountered under eerie conditions. The result is almost recursive. A ghost ship produces a search. The search produces another ghost ship tale. This tells us something profound about the sea. It does not respect our narrative desire for closure. Sometimes the effort to answer a maritime mystery only enlarges it. The rescuer becomes part of the same haunted pattern, another name added to a widening circle of uncertainty. The sea keeps names alive long after logbooks have vanished. A ship's paperwork may rot, burn, sink, or scatter, yet the name often survives. It lives in newspaper archives, family stories, harbor records, ballads, charts, and conversations passed down across generations. That survival matters because names carry identity in a way wreckage alone cannot. A broken hull on the seabed is an object. Once it is linked to a name, it becomes a remembered life. This is one reason ghost ship history feels so enduring. Even when the documents are incomplete and the physical evidence is gone, the name remains available for imagination, grief, and retelling. Mary Celeste, Bichimo, Terra, Valencia. The names themselves begin to gather atmosphere. They become shorthand for unresolved endings. In that sense, the sea does not erase evenly. It may take the people, the papers, and the timber, yet leave behind the word by which the vessel can still be summoned. A name is enough to keep a ship sailing through history long after its material world has faded. Newspapers loved ghost ships because mystery sold better than truth. A clear explanation closes a story. A mystery keeps it alive. Newspapers understood that instinct very well. An abandoned ship arriving without obvious answers was perfect material for editors who needed attention, drama, and repeat readership. Straight facts were useful, but uncertainty was gold. If no one knew exactly why a vessel was empty, then every edition could sharpen the puzzle, add witness accounts, compare theories, and hint that something even stranger might emerge tomorrow. This did not always mean deliberate dishonesty. Often, it meant emphasis. The eeriest detail rose to the top. The ordinary technical explanation sank lower on the page. Over time, that imbalance shaped public memory. Readers did not remember bilge measurements or wind conditions. They remembered meals left untouched and decks found silent. That is how some maritime incidents crossed from report into folklore. The newspaper did not invent the sea mystery, but it often decided which part of the truth would become unforgettable and which part would quietly disappear. Telegraph networks spread ghost ship panics faster than storms themselves. Before the telegraph, a strange maritime incident might move at the pace of ships, letters, and rumor carried from port to port. Once telegraph systems spread, ghost ship news could race inland and across countries with startling speed. A vessel found deserted in one harbor could become breakfast conversation hundreds of miles away almost immediately. That changed the emotional life of these stories. Mystery was no longer local. It became shared in near real time. Editors could reprint fresh fragments. Witnesses could be quoted rapidly, and the public could follow a maritime puzzle as if it were unfolding in their own region. This speed also amplified fear because information arrived before careful verification. A sensational first report could outrun correction and embed itself in the imagination before calmer details appeared. In that sense, telegraphy modernized ghost ship panic. The ocean remained old and dangerous, but now its eerie stories traveled with electric speed. The result was a new kind of haunting, one carried through wires as well as waves. Illustrators turned empty decks into scenes of pure nightmare. Long before film, printed illustration taught people how to see ghost ships. Artists for newspapers and magazines took brief reports and transformed them into unforgettable images: moonlit decks, torn sails, lifeboats hanging loose, and cabins lit as though someone had just stepped out. These pictures did more than decorate a story. They directed emotion. A bare deck could be drawn as solemn, tragic, or terrifying. A hatch left open could suggest accident or menace. Because most readers would never witness a deserted vessel themselves, the illustration often became the event in their mind. That gave artists enormous power over public imagination. They could turn a practical salvage case into a scene that felt almost supernatural. What makes this especially fascinating is that visual drama often outlasted factual detail. People forgot the exact port or date, but remembered the picture of the ship gliding under dark skies with no soul aboard. Illustration helped ghost ships become not just stories, but icons of maritime fear. Victorian readers devoured stories of vessels found with no answers. The Victorian age was perfect ground for ghost ship fascination. It was an era of expanding newspapers, imperial trade, scientific ambition, and deep popular appetite for the strange. Readers wanted true stories, but they especially wanted true stories that seemed to resist truth. A ship found abandoned at sea offered exactly that mixture. It sounded modern and documented, yet opened straight into uncertainty. The public could enjoy the thrill of mystery while believing they were consuming serious reportage. That combination made such stories immensely attractive. They could be discussed in parlors, reprinted in magazines, and folded into wider anxieties about empire, technology, and human limits. Many readers also lived in societies that were learning more about the world while realizing how much still remained beyond understanding. The ghost ship fit that emotional moment perfectly. It was factual enough to feel real, and unanswered enough to feel sublime. Victorian fascination with such cases helped fix them permanently in the culture of maritime wonder. Pulp magazines later made ghost ships stranger, darker, and wilder. Once ghost ships passed from newspapers into pulp magazines, restraint often vanished. Pulps thrived on sensation, atmosphere, and escalating weirdness, so deserted vessels became ideal material for reinvention. A practical abandonment could be recast as a tale of curses, sea monsters, invisible killers, or impossible weather. Headlines grew bolder. Covers grew lurid. The lonely ship on the horizon became a doorway into full fantasy. This shift mattered because it widened the audience and loosened the bond between event and evidence. Readers were no longer simply consuming maritime mystery. They were consuming maritime thrill. Some of the most extravagant ghost ship ideas that now feel ancient were actually intensified by this stage of retelling. Yet the pulps did not create fascination from nothing. They amplified what was already there: the empty deck, the vanished crew, the sea withholding an answer. They simply pushed those elements into darker territory, where history and imagination became harder than ever to separate cleanly. Hollywood inherited ghost ship myths straight from old shipping reports. Cinema did not invent the ghost ship. It inherited a ready-made structure from decades of maritime reporting and folklore. The elements were already perfect for the screen: an isolated vessel, unexplained absence, damaged rigging, flickering light, and the sense that something happened just before the audience arrived. Filmmakers took those ingredients and gave them music, shadow, movement, and spectacle. Yet beneath the theatrical effects, many film ghost ships still carry the bones of real historical reports. The abandoned merchantman, the cursed voyage, the derelict discovered by chance. All of these descend from stories newspapers and sailors had been telling for generations. That lineage is important because it shows how maritime history can migrate into mass entertainment without losing its core emotional charge. The screen version may exaggerate, But the fascination remains rooted in a genuine human response to deserted vessels. Hollywood polished the myth, but the sea wrote the first draft long before cameras arrived. Real maritime law had to deal with abandoned ships practically. However eerie a deserted vessel might seem, someone eventually had to decide what to do with it. Maritime law treats abandoned ships not as supernatural puzzles, but as practical problems involving ownership, salvage rights, cargo, hazard, and responsibility. That legal framework is surprisingly dramatic in its own way. A ship found empty could represent possible profit for salvors, serious liability for owners, and danger for anyone navigating nearby. Courts had to ask hard questions. Was the vessel truly abandoned? Who had the right to board, tow, or claim it? Did rescuers preserve property or seize an opportunity? These issues turned ghost ships into legal cases as well as legends. That contrast is fascinating. Public imagination saw a haunted vessel. Maritime law saw a floating asset or hazard requiring judgment. Yet the two worlds often overlapped because uncertainty about what happened aboard could shape every later dispute. In that sense, the law did not erase the mystery. It had to work inside it, translating eerie silence into formal argument. Salvage crews often became the first witnesses to see mysteries. When a ship was found deserted, the first people to step aboard were often not historians or police, but salvage men. That gave them a unique role in ghost ship history. They entered cabins before later retellings took hold. They saw the raw arrangement of charts, clothing, galleyware, damage, and silence. In other words, they encountered the mystery at its freshest and least edited. Their impressions mattered enormously because they helped set the tone for everything that followed. If they reported orderly cabins and personal possessions untouched, the case felt eerie. If they noted signs of heavy weather and emergency action, the mood changed. Salvage crews therefore acted as accidental narrators of maritime strangeness. They were practical men looking for tow lines, value, and safety, yet they often became the first chroniclers of a vanished human story. There is something compelling about that. A search for profit or duty places them on the threshold of mystery, where business suddenly meets something far more unsettling. Finding a deserted vessel could mean profit, danger, or blame. To discover an abandoned ship at sea was never a simple gift. It might mean salvage money if the vessel could be brought safely to port, but that possibility came tied to risk. Boarding an unknown ship could expose sailors to fire, structural damage, disease, hidden cargo hazards, or rough conditions that made transfer dangerous. Even if the operation succeeded, suspicion might follow. Authorities could question whether the finders had removed property, altered evidence, or exaggerated the state of the ship for advantage. In some famous cases, the discoverers of ghost ships immediately fell under a cloud of rumor. That tells us something important. Maritime mystery rarely ends when the empty vessel is boarded. It often begins there. The finders themselves become characters in the story, praised as rescuers by some, and eyed as possible villains by others. A deserted ship therefore carried not just economic value, but narrative danger. It could change the fortune and reputation of the people unlucky or lucky enough to reach it first. A drifting ship could threaten other vessels long after abandonment. An abandoned ship was not only mysterious, it was dangerous. A large drifting hull could collide with working vessels, damage fishing grounds, foul shipping lanes, or appear suddenly in poor visibility where no one expected an obstacle. Before modern tracking, such derelicts could wander for long periods and become unpredictable hazards. Even a smaller craft could be serious trouble if currents carried it into busy water. That practical threat helps explain why ghost ships drew such strong attention from coastal authorities and sailors alike. They were not just fascinating stories. They were moving risks. A deserted vessel might still have masts, rigging, broken spars, or cargo shifting inside, all of which made close approach hazardous. In some cases, officials had to decide whether to tow, sink, or monitor these wanderers before they harmed others. This adds a striking layer to ghost ship history. The human story may have ended, but the ship's effect on the world had not. Emptiness itself was still moving. Lighthouses and coastal stations often tracked ghost ships from shore. Long before radar swept a horizon, lighthouses and coastal signal stations were among the first places to notice that something was wrong with a ship. Keepers watched movement for hours. They knew how a vessel should behave when it was under command. A ship that wandered strangely, missed a channel, showed no signal, or drifted too close to danger would immediately draw attention. That gave shore observers a special place in ghost ship history. They often saw the mystery before anyone stepped aboard. From a lamproom or tiff station, they might watch a vessel circle, limp forward, or creep toward rocks with no visible response from deck or helm. Those sightings carried a special dread because the watchers could see danger unfolding, but could not always stop it. Many local ghost ship legends began exactly there, with people on solid ground staring out at a ship that seemed alive enough to move, yet empty enough to ignore every warning. Some abandoned vessels crashed ashore and entered local folklore forever. When a deserted ship reached land, the mystery became harder to forget because it no longer belonged only to sailors. Suddenly, whole communities could see it. A wrecked or stranded hull on a beach or reef became part of the local landscape, and with it came speculation, memory, and retelling. Children were warned about it. Fishermen pointed to it. Visitors asked questions about it. That is how some abandoned vessels passed out of maritime record and into folklore. The shore gave them permanence. At sea, a strange ship might appear and vanish. On land, it remained long enough to gather stories. Even after waves and salvage reduced the wreck, the place itself kept the memory alive. A cove, shoal, or stretch of coast could become known for a ship no one fully understood. Over time, the facts shortened, the mood deepened, and the vessel became something larger than an incident. It became part of the character of the shore itself. Coral reefs quietly captured many ships that history almost forgot. Not every ghost ship drifted for years. Some met their end in warmer waters, where coral reefs waited just below the surface, silent and lethal. A reef could tear open a hull, trap a vessel in breaking surf, or hold it fast until crew and cargo were forced away. After that, the sea and reef began their slow work of erasure. Timber broke down. Iron corroded. Coral grew across fittings and beams. Fish moved through cabins that once held charts and voices. This is one reason so many ship stories in reef-strewn waters faded before they became famous. The reef did not preserve mystery in the dramatic way Arctic ice did. It absorbed it. Yet there is something haunting in that too. Entire voyages vanished into bright, living structures beneath shallow water. History often forgot them, but the sea did not. In some places, divers now swim through the remains of ships that once had names, crews, and destinations, and are now part of the reef itself. Ocean currents could carry ghost ships across entire basins. A deserted vessel did not need engines or sail handling to keep traveling. The planet itself could do the work. Ocean currents move with immense patience and power, forming highways that connect coasts, gyres, and distant seas. Once a ship lost its crew, those systems might take over completely. A hull could drift far beyond the region where its trouble began, crossing waters no one aboard had planned to enter. That is one reason ghost ships could feel so uncanny when sighted. They arrived in places where they did not belong, carrying a hidden past from another part of the ocean. Currents turned them into messengers without language. Mariners understood enough of these pathways to be impressed, but not always enough to predict every wandering route. That uncertainty fed the legend. A ship might seem to return from nowhere, when in truth it had been traveling for months under the discipline of wind and current alone. Nature was steering, and nature did not explain itself. The North Atlantic became a highway for some of them. Few parts of the world were better suited to ghost ship stories than the North Atlantic. It was crowded with trade, battered by storms, laced with fog, and ruled by currents that could carry a drifting vessel enormous distances. That combination made it a natural stage for abandoned ships to be found, feared, and remembered. A vessel could leave Europe, North America, or the Caribbean, and still end up wandering along routes filled with other mariners ready to sight it. The traffic kept the stories alive. At the same time, the conditions kept producing them. Heavy weather, icing, collision risk, and long crossings all made abandonment possible. The result was a maritime corridor where ghost ships were not impossible curiosities, but recurring possibilities. This helps explain why so many famous cases belong to Atlantic memory. The ocean there did not merely swallow ships. It recirculated them through human attention, sending empty hulls back into busy waters where someone would almost always be there to stare. Wartime mines left damaged ships drifting into terrifying uncertainty. Sea mines added a special cruelty to maritime danger because they struck without warning and often without an enemy in sight. A ship could be moving through apparently open water when the blast came, tearing the hull, killing crew, and throwing the rest into panic. Yet a mined vessel did not always sink at once. Sometimes it stayed afloat, crippled and smoking, while officers tried to assess damage no one could safely inspect in full. Was the ship about to go down? Were more mines nearby? Could boats be launched without drifting into another explosion? That uncertainty could force evacuation before the ship's true fate was known. The result was a dreadful kind of ghost ship born from modern war. The vessel remained in view, but trust in the sea around it had vanished. Even rescue was dangerous. A drifting ship after a mine strike was not only abandoned. It was surrounded by invisible threat, and that made every decision aboard feel like a wager against something hidden beneath the surface. Submarine attacks sometimes created ghost ships before anyone understood why. In the early eras of submarine warfare, merchant crews often had only fragments of information when disaster began. There might be an explosion, a jolt, a sudden list, or the sight of a torpedo wake moments too late. Smoke, flooding, and confusion followed, but the exact cause was not always immediately clear. That uncertainty shaped the aftermath. A damaged ship might be abandoned in haste, while officers feared a second strike, hidden enemy gunfire, or catastrophic sinking. If the vessel then remained afloat, it could drift on as a silent witness to an attack no one nearby had fully seen. This gave some wartime ghost ships an eerie quality different from old legends. Their emptiness came not from myth, but from a new kind of unseen predator below the surface. The ship was still there, yet the real danger had already slipped away. In a grim sense, submarine warfare modernized the ghost ship, creating empty vessels through attacks so stealthy that confusion became part of the story. Empty troop ships could become symbols of national grief and rumor. A troop ship was never just a ship. It carried sons, brothers, husbands, and the emotional weight of a nation at war. That is why any rumor of a troop ship found damaged, missing, or strangely empty could spread with enormous force. Even when the facts were less dramatic than the fear, the image itself had power. A large military transport without its human cargo seemed to represent absence on an almost unbearable scale. It turned war from headlines into a floating void. In some cases, reports about such ships drew rapid speculation because people desperately wanted to know whether the missing had died, been rescued, or vanished into enemy hands. The empty vessel became a symbol before it became a solved case. That tells us something important about ghost ship history in wartime. The ship did not have to be fully mysterious to feel haunting. It only had to embody the possibility that hundreds of lives had passed through it and were now beyond immediate reach. Even training ships sometimes vanished into stories larger than facts. Training ships were meant to prepare young sailors for discipline, seamanship, and order, which makes it all the more striking when they slid into the realm of ghost ship legend. Because these vessels often carried cadets or apprentices, their losses felt especially poignant. They represented beginnings, not endings. When one vanished, wrecked, strangely, or was later remembered under uncertain circumstances, public imagination often enlarged the story beyond the surviving evidence. Part of this came from emotion. People do not like to imagine the young disappearing into the sea. Part came from symbolism. A training ship is a place where maritime knowledge is passed down, so its loss feels like a break in continuity itself. This made such cases fertile ground for rumor, embellishment, and myth-making. The actual causes might involve weather, poor judgment, or structural trouble. Yet memory often preferred something more resonant. The ship became a lesson, a warning, or a legend, carrying far more atmosphere than the documented facts alone could support. Some ghost ships were later found, but never truly explained. Discovery is not the same as closure. A wreck or drifting vessel can be located, boarded, charted, and photographed, yet still leave the central question untouched. That is one of the most fascinating features of ghost ship history. We often imagine that finding the object will solve the mystery, but the ship may preserve only the outline of events, not their meaning. A hull can show flooding, damage, missing gear, or signs of abandonment. It cannot always tell us what fear felt like aboard, who made the crucial decision, or why one choice was taken over another. This is why some cases remain so powerful, even after material evidence appears. The discovery brings the ship back into the world, but it does not restore the vanished minutes that mattered most. In a sense, the mystery simply changes shape. It becomes more concrete, but not complete. The ship is found. The answer is not. And that gap is often what keeps the story alive. The sea fog of Newfoundland helped create countless phantom sightings. Few places combine maritime hazard and visual uncertainty quite like the waters around Newfoundland. There, cold currents and shifting air create fog banks so dense that the world can seem reduced to a few yards of wet grey air. Shapes emerge suddenly, then dissolve. Sound carries oddly. Distance becomes almost meaningless. In such conditions, it is easy to understand how ordinary ships could become phantom ships in the mind. A mast might appear first, with no hull beneath it. A horn might sound from somewhere unseen. A vessel could loom out of whiteness as if it had not traveled toward you at all, but formed there out of the fog itself. These waters were also rich in traffic, fishing, and wreck history, which gave every strange sight a ready context of fear. This was not an abstract stage for imagination. It was a real working sea where people knew disaster could be one hidden shoal away. Fog did not create the fear. It gave it perfect form. In the age of sail, silence at sea felt supernatural. Modern ships hum. Engines vibrate. Electrical systems murmur. Even at rest, there is often some mechanical sign of life. In the age of sail, the soundscape was different. And that difference matters when thinking about ghost ships. An empty sailing vessel could be disturbingly silent. No engine beat, no propeller wash, no throb through the deck. What remained was only wind in rigging, water against the hull, and the occasional creak of timber under strain. Those sounds are natural, but when separated from human activity, they can feel unnervingly alive. A ship seemed built to contain voices, commands, footsteps, and labor. Remove those things, and the silence becomes its own presence. This is one reason older ghost ship accounts feel so atmospheric, even without embellishment. Approaching a deserted sailing vessel meant crossing into a world where the ship still moved and breathed in a way. Yet the human music that should have filled it was gone. The quiet itself became part of the haunting. No engine noise made an empty ship eerier to approach. To approach a modern powered vessel, even one in trouble, is often to hear it before you understand it. Machinery gives clues. Pumps, generators, motors, and alarms announce whether life remains aboard. An older sailing ship offered far less reassurance. If no crew stood visible and no voices carried, the approach could feel deeply unnerving because there was almost nothing to mediate the silence. Oars or a small boat might bring rescuers closer inch by inch, while the larger vessel loomed above, moving only by wind and current. Every creak then seemed magnified. Every loose rope seemed suspicious. This sensory difference shaped ghost ship encounters more than people often realize. It was not merely the sight of an empty deck that unsettled mariners. It was the combination of scale, motion, and near silence. The ship still existed as a working form, yet gave off none of the human sound that should have completed it. That made every boarding feel like stepping into an unfinished sentence. Unfinished letters aboard deserted ships made mysteries painfully human. Few artifacts cut through maritime legend more sharply than a letter that was never sent. When investigators or rescuers found personal writing aboard an abandoned vessel, the mystery changed at once. It was no longer only about navigation, cargo, or weather. It became intimate. A letter suggests someone thinking of home, arranging practical matters, expressing affection, or trying to compress fear into words. If that page remained unfinished, the effect could be devastating. The sentence breaks where life was interrupted. There is no dramatic flourish, no final speech, only a thought left hanging because the writer did not get the time they expected. This is why such finds are so powerful in ghost ship history. They bypass spectacle and move straight to emotion. A wreck can be abstract. A drifting hull can become legend. A half-written letter brings everything back to one person holding a pen and expecting tomorrow. Few things make maritime mystery feel more immediate than that sudden, ordinary incompletion. A missing chronometer could matter as much as a missing sailor. At sea, a chronometer was not a luxury. It was one of the key tools for finding longitude and therefore for knowing where you actually were. Remove it from a ship, and the implications become serious very quickly. A missing chronometer might suggest deliberate departure in a boat, theft, panic, or an attempt to preserve the most valuable navigational instrument during an emergency. That is why investigators noticed such absences so carefully. A sailor gone missing tells you human loss occurred. A chronometer gone missing tells you someone may have planned for survival, movement, or decision after leaving the ship. It changes the logic of the case. The vessel was not merely deserted. It may have been actively and knowingly abandoned by people trying to carry time and position with them into uncertainty. In ghost ship history, these technical clues matter because they sharpen the emotional picture. The sea mystery is not only what vanished, but what people chose to take when they believed the ship could no longer protect them. Even rescue attempts sometimes failed because ghost ships would not hold. An abandoned vessel could be found in one condition and lost in another before help finished its work. That is because many ghost ships were barely stable by the time rescuers reached them. Hulls leaked. Masts had been weakened. Fire damage hid structural failure. Cargo had shifted. The sea that spared the vessel long enough to make it eerie did not promise to spare it much longer. This made rescue or salvage a race against a moving target. Crews might board, rig tow lines, begin pumping, and think the ship could still be saved, only to watch the hull sag, flood further, or break apart under strain. These failures added another layer of drama to ghost ship stories. It was as though the vessel allowed itself to be seen, but not kept. The rescue becomes part of the mystery rather than the end of it. In many cases, that final loss deepened the legend because the ship seemed to resist return, slipping away just as human hands reached it. Superstition flourished wherever evidence washed away faster than memory. The sea is a poor archivist and an excellent destroyer. It scatters wreckage, fades markings, swallows bodies, and turns clear events into fragments with astonishing speed. When evidence disappears that quickly, imagination moves in to occupy the empty places. That is where superstition thrives. Sailors, coastal communities, and readers ashore all wanted explanations, but the ocean often supplied only hints. A broken spar washes up. A boat is found empty. A name survives without a logbook. In that gap between event and proof, stories multiply. Was the ship cursed? Was it warned against sailing? Did an omen go unheeded? These beliefs were not signs of foolishness alone. They were often attempts to impose order on an environment that erased order almost immediately. Memory held on longer than material evidence could, and so memory began reshaping the loss. This is why ghost ship lore became so rich. The sea removed the hard facts, but left just enough behind for the mind to keep working. Ghost ships reveal how oceans can preserve mystery better than land. On land, a disaster usually leaves tracks, witnesses, boundaries, and recoverable evidence. Roads lead somewhere. Buildings stand still. Debris can often be mapped in relation to fixed points. At sea, all of that changes. The stage itself moves. Wind shifts. Currents carry objects away. Storms erase traces within hours. Even the survivors of an event may be scattered far from where it happened. This makes the ocean unusually good at preserving mystery. It destroys evidence while keeping the emotional shape of the event intact. We may know that a ship was found empty, or that one was sighted drifting long after abandonment, yet never recover the sequence that made those things true. In that sense, the sea does not only hide answers, it preserves unansweredness. It allows a case to remain permanently unfinished in a way land often resists. That is why ghost ships have such lasting power. The ocean is not just the setting for the mystery. It is the reason the mystery survives. Every deserted vessel carried two stories, one real and one imagined. The first story belongs to history. It is built from weather, cargo, route, crew, damage, decisions, and whatever physical traces remain. That story may be incomplete, but it is the one investigators try to reconstruct. The second story begins almost immediately afterward. It is built from rumor, fear, cultural memory, and the irresistible urge to explain what the sea refused to explain clearly. These two stories often travel together. Sometimes they support each other. Sometimes they pull apart until one becomes legend and the other lies buried in technical reports. What makes ghost ships so compelling is that we can feel both at once. We sense the real emergency, that may have unfolded aboard, and we also sense the larger imagined life the vessel gained after silence fell. Neither story is trivial. One tells us what might have happened. The other tells us what human beings do with uncertainty. Every ghost ship therefore floats in a double current, through history on one side and through imagination on the other. Ghost ships still fascinate because the sea rarely gives full answers. That may be the deepest reason the subject never loses its grip. Human beings can tolerate tragedy more easily than unfinishedness. We want causes, endings, and last known moments that line up cleanly. The sea resists that desire with astonishing consistency. It offers fragments instead of closure. A ship is found, but the people are missing. A wreck is located, but the crucial decision remains unknowable. A legend is exposed as doubtful, yet still captures something emotionally true. Ghost ships stand at the meeting point of those frustrations. They are historical enough to feel real and incomplete enough to remain alive in the mind. That combination is rare and powerful. We return to these stories not only because they are eerie, but because they remind us how little control human beings truly have over disappearance, distance, and memory. The sea does not always erase everything. Sometimes it leaves exactly enough behind to keep a question open forever. As our journey across these quiet waters comes to a close, we're left with a world that feels both vast and strangely intimate. We've drifted alongside ships that continued without their crews, stood on silent decks where daily life stopped mid-moment, and followed stories that began in truth and slowly softened into legend. Some were shaped by ice, some by fire, some by fear, and some by decisions made in a single uncertain minute. Across centuries, these vessels have carried more than cargo. They have carried questions. Questions that the sea does not always answer. And perhaps that is why they stay with us. Not because they are frightening, but because they remind us how much of the world still moves beyond our understanding. Now, as the waves settle and the horizon grows still, there is nothing left for you to solve. No mystery you need to carry. Just the slow rhythm of the ocean, rising and falling, steady and endless. Let your thoughts drift like those distant ships. No need to follow them. Just watch them pass. If you're still awake, there's another gentle journey waiting for you on screen now. And if you enjoyed drifting through this one, you might consider liking, subscribing, or sharing a thought below. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, let everything soften. Let the quiet deepen. And allow yourself to drift a little further, carried by calm waters into rest. Sleep well and good night.